I thought it was a sad day for America, and I've been very turned off by the celebration of what happened by Donald Trump's detractors. I understand they don't like him and they don't want him to win the next presidential race, and they want to see him punished for a whole host of things. But it was a before and after moment for our country, and it was a very dangerous precedent to set, one that we will rue in the not-too-distant future.
But when we heard the charges set out by the prosecutor, Alvin Bragg, he made it clear that he did feel that there was sufficient evidence to press ahead with this case. The 34 counts, not just of the money that was paid out to try to prevent negative stories emerging about Donald Trump, but the efforts to cover up what was going on.
So I'm sure Alvin Bragg did feel good yesterday, but there's a reason that this has never happened before in the history of our country. They've never gone after a former president criminally. And that reason is not no one has ever come close to the legal line. This is a bridge that was too far for any other prosecutor to cross because it's getting close to Banana Republic kind of thing, where you demonize the opposition and try to ruin their future political chances by slapping the label criminal on them. Trust me, if you took a deep dive into Hillary and Bill Clinton's finances and Clinton Foundation, I'm sure you could drum up some sort of tax fraud claim against them. You could do this to virtually anyone. And so if you want to go after Donald Trump, I'm sure you can find something he's done wrong, but this is not the lane. I've gone deep into the law on this New York case, and there's no there there. They wanted to get him on falsification of business records. All the 34 counts are repeats of the very same act on different dates. It's not 34 different crimes. It's one thing, criminalized 34 times based on dates.
Well, it's a whole series of different incidents, isn't there, when there were payments and then efforts to cover up the payments and then different arrangements made to make the payments to Stormy Daniels and the other woman who was named yesterday.
So here's what happened. Alvin Bragg is claiming that Trump falsified his business records in New York by classifying as legal payments what were in fact hush money that was paid to the various people claiming to have dirt on him. That, at worst, is a misdemeanor, but he couldn't charge it as a misdemeanor because that has a 2-year statute of limitations, and we're 5 years post the act. Now, if you can charge it as a felony, you're within the statute of limitations, arguably. So how do you make that act a felony? You have to allege that the bookkeeping shenanigans were done to cover up an underlying crime. What is the underlying crime? Alvin Bragg, in a too cute by half statement yesterday, said, I don't have to tell you. And then when pressed, said, well, it could be federal election law. It could be state election law. It could be state tax law. But I've taken a hard look at all three of those, and it cannot be. He is not correct. Federal election law requires so much more than he has here to prove that you have violated it. You have to prove that this money would not be spent by anyone. No one would spend money on this unless they were running for office. Can you really say no one would pay hush money to a porn star threatening to go public unless they were running for public office? No, it's not a subjective standard. So even if he can prove Donald Trump wanted to silence Stormy Daniels because he thought it would hurt his electoral chances, you still lose. That's not good enough. It has to be something very specific, like hiring a campaign manager, setting up field offices, something, again, an expenditure that no one would approve unless they were running for office. I do not make that up. I get that from the former head of the Federal Election Commission under Bill Clinton. That's the standard. He doesn't have it.
Well, we have already seen Michael Cohen, who was working for Donald Trump at one stage, but has then testified against him, face a court case over these sorts of payments. And what we heard yesterday in court was the judge and the prosecutor making it clear that they felt that this effort to catch and kill any stories that might negatively affect Trump's election campaign was against the law. And they made the point that, well, no one, not even a former president, should be above the law.
Well, that everyone can agree with that, but the judge did not weigh in on the merits of this claim at all. That's not true. The prosecutor believes in his claim, understandably. He's a political animal. And by the way, the judge, too, is a political person in New York. In order to get on the trial court bench in New York, you have to run for office. And this district, in which he is a sitting judge, went 87% for Joe Biden in the last election. So they're both political. But the judge did not yet appropriately weigh in on the merits of his claim.
They're part of a political system, aren't they? Because, the justice system is political in the United States.
It depends. Once you get up to the New York State Court of Appeals, which is our highest court, those are not elected judges. The U.S. Supreme Court, the federal bench, entirely they are not elected judges. They have lifetime tenure because they're not supposed to be political. They have judicial philosophies that may lean right or left depending on the justice. But they're not supposed to be political animals. That's a new thing that's happening in our country that I personally, as a lawyer, am very sad about. But what's happening in this case is a man who ran for office, Alvin Bragg, the DA in Manhattan, on the promise that he would get Trump. He said it repeatedly. He touted that when he was in the AG's office, he'd gone after the Trump organization and the Trump family and Trump himself over 100 times, and that he had the expertise to do it again. Has made good on his promise and broken a 250-year precedent of never doing this to somebody who held the office of president. If you hate him, don't reelect him. You don't criminalize things that aren't crimes.
You very publicly clashed with Donald Trump during that 2016 election campaign. How do you think this is going to play out as Donald Trump makes it clear that, he's heading for another run at the White House?
Well, I think this is going to do to the Republican Party what the fight over Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh did to it. I think it's going to unite the party behind the man they see as unfairly attacked. I think the Democrats, a large portion of them that wanted this to happen, think it's a good idea because they want Trump to be the nominee and they predict that this will galvanize the Republicans behind him. They think Trump's the easiest to beat, and therefore they're in favor of this. For others, it's just punitive, but for some, it's an electoral strategy. And to those people, I say, be careful what you wish for, because what we're going through right now feels very familiar to me to 2015, where Trump dominates every corner of the media, where his Republican opponents struggle to figure out what the proper line of attack is as he finds himself immersed in scandal after scandal, where overconfident Democrats say we want him because he's imminently beatable, and there's no way the American electorate will elect this guy. And we saw how that turned out in 2016. So I really think they should be careful what they wish for, because Donald Trump, whatever his flaws, and there are plenty, has a unique hold and a huge faction of the Republican Party. And the more they come for him, the more he seems like a fighter, like someone who could fight for you, the little guy, to more than just Republicans. The independents are split right down the middle on whether they think this indictment is a good idea. And if he gets slapped with two more in Atlanta, Georgia, in Washington, D.C., he will be seen as persecuted. And I think it's going to have the opposite effect of the one his Democratic detractors intend.
But given that there is every likelihood that this or other criminal proceedings will still be unresolved by the time we get to the next election, yes, perhaps it will mean that he's got an even greater chance of getting that Republican nomination. But do you think the wider American public would really vote for Trump if he was in that position?
There are plenty of reasons to doubt it. I understand that. It seems hard to believe there are still undecided voters out there on Trump. However, he did increase his number of voters from 16 to 20. And let me give you this scenario, Carol. Joe Biden's about to turn 82 years old. He's already having trouble remembering who's dead and who's alive. That's an actual fact that we've seen him mess up at least twice. He is growing more and more feeble. He does not seem a robust, nearly 82-year-old man. And the American populace does not like Kamala Harris, most of all the Democratic Party. So if we get closer and closer to an election in which we're looking at a Joe Biden-Donald Trump contest, and Joe Biden has one health failing, one stumble, like we saw with Hillary Clinton 2 months before the 2016 election, where she fell into a van, lost her footing, and seemed to pass out, which hurt her in the polls. If we have one of those moments and the American population is looking at the possibility of a Kamala Harris presidency versus that of Donald Trump, totally new ballgame.